Will we ever know all we need to know about state spending on President Jacob Zuma's private residence? Or will it resemble the story of the arms deal, where years later the public is still seeking answers? Let's look at what we know, what we're unlikely to know, and why we need to know the truth about Nkandla. In December 2012, President Zuma was still very much in the homemaking mood. He ordered a bunch of solar-powered toilets to do a pilot among households in the greater Nkandla. And while it remains unclear if the novelty toilets ever went into pilot, we do know two things. Quite a bit about expenditure at the President's private residence, the high security fence around the property that cost Public Works 9.2 million rand, helipads built by the state for Zuma and his guests, and the 582 million rand the KwaZulu-Natal Transport Department spent on tarring the road that links Nkandla with Kranskop. Secondly, we know more about the reasoning behind the 208 million rand in public funds spent on security upgrades to the President's residence.
Parliament's Joint Standing Committee on Intelligence recently compiled a report about the probe that was done into Nkandla and about whether that probe gave valid reasons for the security update. So the report was basically about the report into the probe. The DA has accused the Parliamentary Committee of being too soft, making it a whitewash.
The task team was quite specific in its claims in that report. One of the claims was that Nkandla experiences every 50 years earthquakes of between 5 and 6 on the Richter scale. In fact, what the witness did was we went and spoke to experts to establish what the true figures were in terms of the seismic activity in that area. And we found from the leading expert in the country on that area is that the strongest earthquake that Nkandla has ever experienced in recent human history was 4.3, which is 20 times weaker than the earthquake quoted by the security cluster as happening quite frequently there.
The fact that there's a lack of infrastructure, that Nkandla is in a very impoverished area, would have contributed to the spend on security upgrades. Stuff like roads, there are no proper roads, and you can imagine that there should perhaps be a proper road for the President to travel on, especially in the case of an emergency, if somebody's ill, if you have to evacuate people by road. You can kind of think that that might have been justified.
Perhaps the most comical of the state's claims in the Joint Standing Committee's report was that some of the small chicken coops between the residential buildings at Nkandla could be used for intruders to hide behind. And so a great deal of money was spent to build a new chicken compound, a new farming compound, effectively for the Zuma family at taxpayers' expense as a security measure. And the destruction of all the smaller chicken coops. And experts with the Institute for Security Studies, including Dr. Johan Berger, described this as ridiculous.
Now, with a lot of emphasis on what Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's report is likely to reveal, let's look at what we still don't know and might never know.
The report of the Public Protector will answer some questions. It will give us names or a name of an individual or an official who is basically the person who committed the impropriety, who was unethical in their conduct by deviating from the tender rules and spending so extravagantly. That's the question that it will answer. Basically, it will give us who to point the finger to, but on how much the President knew, that the question is still out there. The ministers have already said that they came in during the construction process and they adopted some of these companies. They put these companies into the planning for the security upgrades. But it also begs the question, why then, if the question and the emphasis on security is so high when it comes to the security ministers, why then were some of these contractors not vetted? If the emphasis on security was so high, why didn't you vet them?
I think the release of Nkandla's report will be an important step in transparency, in getting openness around this project, in revealing who paid for exactly what, for every brick, for every stone, for every thatch roof in the project. President Zuma will not, it seems, come forward on his own volition to disclose this information. I don't know if it will ever end or if it will stay with us like the arms deal has been over more than 20 years, and answers still remain about the expenditure. But I do think it's important that institutions of democracy like the Public Protector gets the opportunity to release their statements, and for the law enforcement agencies to step in, a unit like the Hawks, to probe whether there were any bribes paid in this upgrade, which seems to have been the case.
And finally, in the face of attempts to prevent pictures like these from being shown, why is it our business to know so much about Nkandla?
I'm very concerned about efforts of the government to try and suppress the publication of pictures. A lot of national key points are often published, like the Union buildings, pictures of the Union buildings, but that building is protected very well by government, and so no one can gain entrance to it. The same applies to Nkandla. The mere fact that it's a private home of the president, for which government has paid the upgrades, makes it an issue of huge public interest, and I wouldn't stop publishing pictures. I think it's of utmost public interest for the public to know what they have spent their money on, what this project looks like. It was never the media's intention to show people how to get into the complex, to give clues to thieves and terrorists to enter President Zuma's private home, but to show the extent from the air or from a distance of this massive complex, a really unprecedented development in this country.